Welcome back. Today we're going to look at char arrays. So, we've been using strings for the most part up till now, but the way strings were handled in the past was something called a char array. And so char array was used when this language was just C, before it was C++. And what a char array is, very simply, it's just an array. It's an array of characters. One distinction, though, is that a char array needs to be null terminated. So what's a null terminated char array? It basically means that the last element of your character array has to be the character \0. And what \0 is really just it's the null character. You've used \n or for carriage return. You've used maybe a \t for a tab. \0 is the null character. And that indicates the end of the text data. And this makes it easier. Rather than having to know specifically how many characters are in the array, the C++ can use the null character to find out when it's at the end of the last valid element in the array. So when you're declaring a char array, it's the same as declaring any array. You have the type char, the identifier you want for your array, and then in square braces you put the size of the array. And this can be either a literal number like 50 or 40 or 15 here, or you can pass in a variable and it'll use that variable as long as that variable is an integer. Now, once we have that, realize that not all those elements will be valid. So the null termination character will indicate in that array what the last one is. So that means you have to have your array has to be at least one larger than the largest size string you're going to store or text you're going to store, because it has to have space for that null terminated character. So given that, let's declare a character array named student name that can hold up to 75 characters. So pause this video and then think about the answer and hit continue. So let's declare a character array called student name that can hold up to 75 characters. Pause, write down or think of the answer, and then hit continue. So we're going to use the char keyword for a character and the name of the array, student name, and then the size. So you might be tempted to put 75, but remember we need that null termination character, that /0. So I'm going to make this, since we might need a full 75 characters, I'm going to make it 76. So there's our char array for student name. So how do we initialize a character array? Well, you can initialize a character array like this. Here we've declared a character array with 15 elements called line, and then we can it's the same as assigning a string into a string, it's just you're using a character array. And you can see here we have I love C++, and then we have our null characters inserted automatically. And so when C++ will automatically put the null character in there. You don't necessarily have to do that implicitly yourself with a character array. So let's declare a character array called student name and that can hold 75 characters and then initialize it to your name. So we had char student name, and we're just going to equals, Rob Garner. And what that will do is it will initialize the array to those elements. And there's 76 elements in here, so we're going to have a number of /0s in here that will automatically be put in by C++. So the null character is used by C++ to indicate where the end of the data is located. You can imagine that if we didn't have that, we would have to tell C++ somehow how many of the characters in the array are valid characters. But we don't have to do that because C++ just pads out the rest of the character array with this null character. And so just to see how that works, here's 4 different ways of declaring a character array, and one of these is actually a string. So we're going to declare this string called string object, and this text is in the string object. We're going to assign that into a string. And then next we're going to declare char cpp love 20, and it just says I love C++, and that's going to be assigned into this 20 character char array. And then here we have no null text. We're just going to declare a character array, but because we're not assigning anything into it, this won't have any null characters in it. Because the null character is added when you do the assignment operation. And then we have this no null text one here where, well, actually, once we get no null text defined, we're going to assign each individual character one by one. And when we do that, because we're doing it one by one, if you were to do this, if you didn't assign a /0 in the end, there would be no null termination. And then here with no text, where we're just declaring the char array, but we're not actually doing any initialization. So again, there won't be any null characters in it. And so when you do that, remember that the first object that's defined on the stack is going to go on the far end of the stack, and each one will go earlier in the stack. So we get string object, we get CPP love, then no null text, then no text. And what that ends up looking like in memory is kind of like this. We have this is a string object, and it will have null characters at the end of it. And then CPP love will have a null character at the end. But the no null text and no text won't have any null characters. So what happens if we were to try to output that to the cout? Well, when we output string object, we can see string object, this is text is any string object. It gets the whole thing, and it just displays normally. So our strings work really well. And generally speaking, with C++ at this stage, you should use strings rather than char arrays, but sometimes you need to use char array. And then here with CPP love, we have this null character at the end, so it will stop at the end of I love C++. Now, where it gets odd is here. Notice with no null text, when we try to display it, it says whoops, no null, which is what we put in here, whoops, no null. But because there's no null text, it starts just displaying the random stuff that's in here. And this character here is just, it just happens to be whatever ASCII code happens to be in memory at the time. And it just keeps displaying. And then it goes and shoots over the entire no null text. And because there's no /0, C++ keeps printing characters until it finds one. Well, where does it find one? Well, in the next variable. It's in the stack. And so when you print no null text, it not only displays what's in no null text, but it also displays what's in the next variable until it gets to a null character. And then when you go to no text, it does the same thing. 20 characters of junk, whoops, no null, some more junk, and then I love C++. So you can see it's very important with char arrays to make sure that when you assign things into it, you make sure that there's a /0 at the end of it. And if you use the string assignments, it'll be taken care of for you automatically. Otherwise, you have to do it. And that trash character, it's just one of the characters in the ASCII code. And if we just show the ASCII table, you can go to ASCIItable.com and let's see. And if you look at the extended ASCII codes, it's either 185 or it's the one facing the other direction. Let's see. It's 204. That's the character. It just happens that, in this case, the trash characters are character 204. So how do you get input from the user into a character array? Basically the same way you kind of do with a string. You can use cin or getLine. And the way you use it for the getLine is you say cin.getLine, and then you notice the getLine has a overload that takes in for the first parameter your character array. And the way you specify a character array is a parameter in a function is is a pointer to a char. And that's basically what an array is. It's a pointer to whatever the type is. So this is your array name would go in here, and then you have the option to put in the maximum number of characters to read in, which is probably a good idea. Otherwise, you might get too much information into your array. And so here we can see we're declaring a name for 50 elements, asking the user to enter their name, and then we're using getLine to get the user's name into name. And because there's 50 elements in the array, we're limiting the input to 50 characters. So let's write the code that will input a name into a 75 element character called student name. So pause, think about or write down your answer and hit continue. So here we have our student name, and the input would just be cn.getLine, and then it would be the name of the array, student name, and then here we have 76 elements, so we'll put that in, and that's how you would do your get line. And then of course you probably want to see out a prompt, something like this, and that's how you would do your input. So let's look at character array and functions. So there's several useful functions you can use for character arrays. And so here's some of them. There's string concatenation function, string cat. And if you put two character arrays, it will just combine them together and create one array in destination. So it'll take src and add it to destination. And when you use it, it looks like this. String cat s1, s2, and then s1 will have the concatenated values. There's string copy. You put two character arrays in here, string copy s1 s2. It'll take whatever's in s1 and copy it into, or it'll take whatever's in s2 and copy it into s1. The string compare will return 0 if they're both equal, greater than 0 if s1 is more than s2, and less than 0 if s2 is greater than s1. So it might look something like this. And then you have a string in a string function, which will look for one character array in another one. It'll see if s2 occurs in s1, and so that can be useful for searching for strings. And it returns a pointer to the character. So this is actually a pointer, not an index. It's a pointer. And then let's see, we have a string length, which will return the length of a string of a char array, and then the string copy, which will copy the source to the destination. And you can specify where the start is. So there's several of these character array functions that may still be useful. So in C++, even though most of the time you'll use strings, it's useful to know how character arrays work. At this stage, I recommend you complete the character array demo. And today we went over character arrays. Thank you very much.